Pleasure is not a modern luxury. It is an ancient survival mechanism, woven into the fabric of life itself. Long before language, art, or culture, there existed a silent teacher guiding every creature toward survival, the sensation of pleasure. In the primordial struggle for existence, life needed a reason to act, a reason to seek food, safety, and connection. Evolution discovered that the simplest way to ensure this was through reward. When something beneficial occurred, a nutritious meal, a successful hunt, a moment of warmth or social contact, the brain responded with a surge of chemicals that made the experience feel good. This feeling good was not accidental. It was evolution's clever way of reinforcing behaviors that kept organisms alive. The creatures that felt pleasure when they ate, mated, or bonded were more likely to repeat those actions, ensuring the survival of their genes. Over millions of years, this feedback loop became one of biology's most efficient systems. The reward mechanism. Within the human brain, this system revolves around dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, and serotonin, a chemical symphony designed to mark certain behaviors as desirable. When early humans gathered food, cooperated with others, or found safety, these chemicals were released, strengthening the connection between action and reward. In this way, pleasure became a kind of compass, pointing toward life-sustaining choices. Yet evolution is not sentimental. It is not designed for happiness, only for survival. Pleasure was never meant to be constant. It was designed to fade quickly so that we would seek it again, ensuring that the behaviors crucial to life would never stop. The satisfaction of hunger leads to fullness, but fullness gives way to hunger once more. The warmth of fire is comforting, but the cold of night returns. This cycle kept our ancestors moving, building, creating, and striving. In this sense, pleasure is not an end but a motivator, an internal push that fuels the continuity of life. What makes humans unique, however, is our ability to imagine, to anticipate, and to recreate pleasure. Unlike animals, we do not need the direct experience of survival to trigger our reward systems. We can simulate them through art, storytelling, dreams, and inventions. This ability to manipulate pleasure transformed our species. Fire became more than warmth, it became comfort. Food became cuisine. Intimacy became love. Music, laughter, and even religion emerged as forms of pleasure that transcended immediate biological needs. Pleasure evolved from a survival signal into a source of meaning, but with this expansion came danger. As civilization advanced, we began to engineer our own sources of pleasure, often in ways that far exceeded what evolution prepared us for. The modern world is saturated with stimuli, designed to hijack our ancient wiring. Sugar that once guided us to ripe fruit now floods our diet in endless forms. Images and entertainment that once reflected real experience now deliver dopamine without substance. Digital validation offers the illusion of social connection without the depth of human intimacy. Our brains, evolved in scarcity, now drown in abundance. The same system that once ensured survival now drives over consumption, addiction, and restlessness. The paradox of pleasure is that the more we pursue it for its own sake, the less it satisfies us. This is not a flaw of pleasure itself, but a misunderstanding of its purpose. Evolution never meant for pleasure to be permanent. It meant for it to be instructive. Pleasure tells us when we are aligned with life, when we are eating what nourishes us, bonding with those who support us, or striving towards something meaningful. It was always meant to guide, not to dominate. When pleasure is disconnected from purpose, it becomes hollow, leaving us craving more but feeling less. This is why humans, despite unprecedented comfort and technology, often report more anxiety, depression, and emptiness than ever before. Our instincts are caught in an environment that offers the sensation of fulfillment without its substance. The true evolutionary role of pleasure was to sustain effort, not replace it. The hunter felt joy in the chase, the mother in nurturing her child, the tribe in celebrating together, all expressions of pleasure tied to struggle, growth, and connection. The modern individual, however, often seeks pleasure without the journey that gives it meaning. We chase the feeling, not the reason behind it. Yet even in this distorted state, pleasure remains a powerful teacher. It reveals what we value and where we may have lost our balance. The same instinct that once pulled us toward survival can still lead us toward higher forms of life, toward creativity, love, wisdom, and self-discovery if we learn to listen to it properly. To understand pleasure is to understand humanity's deepest motivations. It is the thread that connects our biology to our psychology, our ancient instincts to our modern desires. It explains why art moves us, why music heals, why companionship matters, and why the pursuit of meaning feels good. Pleasure, at its core, is a reward for harmony, for aligning action with life's flourishing. It reminds us that life is not meant to be mechanical or joyless, but that joy must serve life, not the other way around. When we eat to nourish, when we love to connect, when we create to express, pleasure fulfills its evolutionary purpose. It drives us toward what sustains the species and the spirit. But when we chase pleasure detached from these roots, we fall into its shadow: addiction, numbness, endless wanting. The true wisdom of evolution lies in balance, pleasure as guide, not master. To reclaim this balance, we must see pleasure not as the goal of life, but as a signal from life itself, a language through which nature tells us, "You are on the right path." Only by remembering that can we transform pleasure from obsession back into its original role, a quiet, powerful affirmation that living, striving, and connecting are still worth it. The brain's reward system: dopamine and desire. The human brain is a universe of impulses, circuits, and chemistry, and at the heart of it lies one of evolution's most ingenious inventions: the reward system. It is not just a set of neurons firing randomly when something feels good, it is a biological compass, a motivational engine that drives everything we do. This system evolved to ensure that behaviors essential for survival and reproduction are repeated. At its center stands dopamine, a small molecule with extraordinary influence. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure itself. It is the chemical of anticipation, of wanting, of desire. It motivates us to act, to seek, to pursue what our brain perceives as rewarding. When our ancestors hunted for food, built shelter, or sought companionship, dopamine was the invisible force propelling them forward, turning instinct into action. It is the biological promise of satisfaction, whispering, "If you do this, something good will come." And when the reward finally arrived, when they ate, rested, or embraced, the brains released other chemicals like endorphins and serotonin to complete the feeling of pleasure. This elegant interplay between wanting and liking is what kept our species alive. Yet, in the modern world, this once balanced system faces an overwhelming environment of artificial rewards that exploit its design. Our brains evolved in scarcity. They are programmed to chase rare sources of pleasure. But today, those sources are everywhere: sweet food, sexual imagery, notifications, entertainment, all delivering quick hits of dopamine without real effort or consequence. The result is a cycle of constant pursuit and diminishing satisfaction, what scientists call the dopamine loop. Each time we experience something pleasurable, the brain records it as valuable, strengthening the neural pathways that make us want it again. But with overexposure, these same pathways dull over time, requiring more stimulation to achieve the same feeling. This is the biological foundation of addiction, whether to substances, screens, or validation. It is not that we love pleasure too much, it is that our brain's reward system has been hijacked by an environment it was never built to handle. In nature, effort and reward were tightly linked. The brain released dopamine when progress was made toward a goal, not just when the goal was achieved. The chase was as rewarding as the catch. Modern life, however, short-circuits this system. We can skip the chase entirely. Order food with a tap, seek attention with a post, experience intimacy through pixels. Dopamine surges without context, and with every effortless reward, our sense of meaning weakens. Desire becomes detached from purpose, leaving us restless even in abundance. This is why pleasure fades so quickly, and why we constantly seek novelty. Dopamine does not respond to repetition, it responds to change. The first taste, the first like, the first victory, they excite us. But as the brain adapts, what once thrilled us becomes ordinary, and we move on to the next stimulus. It is not that our capacity for pleasure is broken, it is that the system that evolved to guide survival now operates in a world where every instinct can be endlessly indulged. The result is a strange paradox. We have more access to pleasure than any generation before us, yet we are more anxious, distracted, and unsatisfied. To understand dopamine is to understand this modern discontent. It teaches us that the pursuit of happiness is not the same as the pursuit of pleasure, and that desire without direction becomes despair. But this same system, when understood and respected, can also be our greatest ally. Dopamine is not inherently destructive. It is the engine of learning, creativity, and ambition. It pushes scientists to discover, artists to create, lovers to connect. The problem arises only when we let it run without meaning. When dopamine aligns with purpose, when the pursuit leads to growth or connection, it gives life energy and vitality. Every great achievement, from building civilizations to writing symphonies, began as a spark of dopamine-driven curiosity. The key lies in how we channel it. Modern neuroscience shows that sustainable happiness comes not from maximizing dopamine peaks, but from balancing them with rest, mindfulness, and delayed gratification. The simple act of working towards something meaningful, learning a skill, cultivating a relationship, mastering a craft, keeps the reward system healthy. This is because dopamine release is stronger and more stable when it comes from progress, not from instant success. It thrives on effort and uncertainty. It needs the chase to give value to the catch. The irony of our age is that we chase pleasure but avoid struggle, even though struggle is the very condition that gives pleasure its power. When we learn to appreciate the process rather than just the reward, we reclaim the natural rhythm evolution intended. Desire becomes a compass again, not a cage. We can begin to use dopamine consciously setting goals that matter, taking breaks from overstimulation, and finding satisfaction in small progress. This is not about denying pleasure, but about restoring its purpose. The brain's reward system is not an enemy to be tamed, but a teacher to be understood. It reveals that the deepest satisfaction does not come from constant pleasure, but from meaningful pursuit. Dopamine, in its purest form, is not the drug of indulgence, it is the chemistry of motivation, of hope, of drive. It is the signal that life is still moving forward, that there is still something worth chasing. In a world overflowing with artificial rewards, understanding this distinction may be the only way to stay truly alive inside. Pleasure alone was never meant to sustain us. It was meant to guide us. Desire was never meant to enslave us. It was meant to remind us that life, in all its effort and uncertainty, is still worth the pursuit. Pleasure versus happiness, the hidden difference. Pleasure and happiness are often used as if they mean the same thing, but in truth, they come from very different places within the human experience. Pleasure is a momentary reaction, a flash of satisfaction born from stimulation, while happiness is an enduring state, a sense of inner balance that does not depend on external triggers. Pleasure is the spark, happiness is the flame. Evolution designed pleasure to reward behaviors that helped our ancestors survive: eating, mating, social bonding. But it designed happiness as the feeling that arises when life aligns with meaning, purpose, and connection. Pleasure is biological, happiness is existential. The difference lies not just in duration, but in depth. Pleasure exists in the body, happiness lives in the mind. One fades quickly, the other endures. When you taste something sweet, hear applause, or receive a compliment, the brain releases dopamine, producing a rush of pleasure. But soon after, the system resets, leaving you wanting more. This is known as the hedonic treadmill, the endless loop of desire and satisfaction that keeps us moving, but never arriving. Happiness, on the other hand, is not about chasing the next high. It's about stability, gratitude, and coherence between what you do and what you value. It's tied to serotonin rather than dopamine, to contentment rather than craving. Where pleasure demands more, happiness is enough. This difference explains why a life full of pleasures can still feel empty, and why those with fewer material comforts can still radiate joy. Pleasure is intensity. Happiness is harmony. The modern world, however, confuses one for the other. We are surrounded by industries built on the promise of pleasure, advertising, entertainment, social media, all engineered to trigger dopamine surges that mimic happiness but never sustain it. We scroll, consume, and indulge, believing that pleasure will eventually accumulate into happiness, but it doesn't. The brain adapts too quickly. What was once exciting becomes ordinary. The more we seek pleasure as the path to happiness, the further we drift from it. True happiness often feels quiet, even unremarkable. It comes from belonging, love, purpose, or the peace of knowing you are where you should be. Pleasure, by contrast, is loud, urgent, and temporary. It burns bright, then leaves you craving another spark. The human tragedy is that we often mistake the flicker for the flame. This confusion has deep psychological consequences. When people chase pleasure believing it will make them happy, they end up overstimulated and underfulfilled. Their brain's reward circuits become desensitized, and soon they require stronger and more frequent pleasures to feel the same effect. This is why addiction in all its forms, whether to substances, success, or validation, is not just a chemical problem, but an existential one. It is the search for happiness in places it cannot be found. Happiness is not about the intensity of experience, but the quality of awareness. It's what happens when the mind stops chasing and starts appreciating. The philosopher Epicurus understood this thousands of years ago. He argued that true pleasure comes from the absence of pain and disturbance, not from indulgence. For him, happiness was found in moderation, friendship, and simple living, a philosophy echoed today in mindfulness and minimalism. Neuroscience agrees, the brain cannot sustain constant pleasure without stress. Too much dopamine without rest disrupts balance, while contentment relies on a slower rhythm of satisfaction and gratitude. In simple terms, pleasure excites, happiness calms. One activates the body, the other heals it. Yet both are essential. Pleasure gives life color, movement, and energy. It pushes us to explore, to taste, to feel. Happiness gives life meaning. It roots us in being, reflection, and peace. Problems arise only when one dominates the other. A life of only pleasure burns out. A life of only calm stagnates. The art of living lies in balancing the two, embracing moments of pleasure without becoming enslaved to them, and cultivating happiness without rejecting life's joys. The brain itself reflects this balance. Dopamine drives desire and pursuit, while serotonin supports contentment and stability. Both systems evolve to work together, one to make us reach outward, the other to help us rest inward. When this harmony breaks, modern suffering begins. We live in an age of overstimulation, where every moment offers a new hit of dopamine, but few offer space for meaning. We have pleasure without fulfillment, excitement without peace. Our ancestors struggled for survival. We struggle for satisfaction. Yet the path back to happiness is not through renouncing pleasure, but through understanding it. Pleasure is meant to signal that we're doing something right, not to replace the purpose behind it. Eating delicious food brings joy when shared. It becomes emptiness when consumed mindlessly. Achievement brings satisfaction when it expresses growth. It becomes hollow when done for validation. The secret is not to reject pleasure, but to connect it to values that endure. When pleasure serves meaning, it transforms into joy. When it stands alone, it fades into craving. The hidden difference between pleasure and happiness, then, is one of direction. Pleasure points inward, asking, "How do I feel now?" Happiness points outward, asking, "Is my life aligned with what matters?" One is about sensation, the other about significance. To live wisely in a pleasure-driven world is to remember that happiness grows quietly in the spaces between pleasures, in gratitude, love, purpose, and rest. The chase for more will always end in exhaustion, but the choice to be present, to appreciate, and to connect will always end in peace. Evolution gave us pleasure so we would survive. Consciousness gives us happiness so we can truly live. Human beings have an extraordinary capacity to adapt, and this ability has ensured our survival for millennia. But the same mechanism that helped us endure hardship has also trapped us in a perpetual cycle of wanting more, a psychological phenomenon known as the hedonic treadmill. It describes the way we quickly return to a baseline level of happiness, no matter how much pleasure, success, or comfort we achieve. At its core, the hedonic treadmill is evolution's cruel joke. The better life becomes, the less satisfied we remain. Thousands of years ago, this was a useful trait. When our ancestors found food, shelter, or safety, their pleasure didn't last long, ensuring they kept striving and adapting in a harsh environment. A brief surge of dopamine pushed them forward, but it faded quickly, preventing complacency. The instinct to want more was not greed, it was survival. However, in the modern age, that same mechanism operates in a world of abundance rather than scarcity. The treadmill that once kept us alive now exhausts us. We live surrounded by comfort, yet we continue to chase new forms of pleasure, better phones, bigger houses, higher status, believing that the next milestone will finally deliver lasting happiness. But as soon as we reach it, the satisfaction fades and the cycle begins again. Neuroscience explains this through hedonic adaptation. The brain is designed to normalize stimuli over time. The first bite of a favorite meal floods the brain with dopamine, but by the 10th bite, the effect diminishes. The same applies to experiences. Winning an award, buying a new car, entering a new relationship, all deliver intense joy at first, but soon the novelty wears off, and our emotional state resets to where it was before. The pleasure was never meant to last, it was meant to motivate. This constant recalibration is why even dramatic life changes, winning the lottery or suffering injury, tend to lose emotional impact after months or years. Studies show that people often return to their personal set point of happiness regardless of external circumstances. The treadmill keeps moving and we keep running. This is not merely a psychological quirk, it's deeply biological. The brain's reward system evolved to prioritize novelty, not satisfaction. Dopamine fires strongest when we anticipate a reward, not when we experience it. Once the brain learns what to expect, the chemical thrill fades, and we are compelled to seek something new. This is why pleasure fades faster than desire. The mind is wired to crave, not to rest. In the ancient world, that craving drove innovation and exploration. It pushed humans to hunt, to migrate, to build. But in today's hyperstimulated culture, it drives consumption and dissatisfaction. We are surrounded by products, apps, and media designed to exploit our hedonic circuitry, constantly feeding us novelty without fulfillment. Each new experience offers a temporary high, but the baseline always resets. We mistake motion for progress, thinking that running faster on the treadmill will finally get us somewhere. Yet, the truth is, we remain in place. The emotional consequences are profound. The hedonic treadmill breeds restlessness, envy, and burnout. When happiness becomes conditional, dependent on achieving more, we are never truly at peace. The goalpost keeps shifting. A raise leads to higher expectations. A relationship leads to new desires. And even spiritual pursuits can become another form of ambition. Modern culture glorifies this endless striving, mistaking constant improvement for genuine growth. But improvement without gratitude is just motion without direction. To step off the treadmill, one must recognize that adaptation is inevitable, but not destiny. While we cannot stop our brains from normalizing pleasure, we can choose how to relate to it. Research shows that gratitude, mindfulness, and perspective-taking can slow hedonic adaptation by keeping experiences vivid in memory. When we consciously reflect on what we have, the brain reactivates the circuits of appreciation that novelty once triggered. Similarly, pursuing intrinsic goals, growth, connection, creativity, creates more enduring satisfaction than chasing extrinsic ones like wealth or status. The reason is simple. Intrinsic goals engage meaning, not just reward. They satisfy the deeper layers of human need that pleasure alone cannot reach. True happiness comes not from having more, but from needing less. Yet, in practice, this realization is hard to live by. Modern life constantly tells us that happiness is one purchase, achievement, or experience away. But each time we reach that next thing, the brain quietly moves the baseline forward, erasing the progress. The treadmill runs beneath every success story, every viral post, every new relationship. It whispers that something is missing, that joy is always just beyond reach. Recognizing this illusion is the first step toward freedom. When we understand that pleasure's fading nature is not failure but design, we can stop chasing permanence in impermanent things. We can enjoy the highs without fearing their end, knowing that they were never meant to last. Pleasure has always been a force that drives human behavior, but in the modern world, it has become something more, a commodity. What was once a natural biological reward for survival has been transformed into one of the most profitable products in history. From the sugar industry to streaming platforms, from luxury fashion to social media, entire economies are now built on the science of desire. The economics of pleasure is the story of how companies learn to measure, manipulate, and monetize human craving. At its core, this system exploits the same ancient neural circuitry that evolution designed to keep us alive. The human brain releases dopamine when we anticipate reward, when we expect food, intimacy, novelty, or social approval. It's this anticipation, not fulfillment, that keeps us engaged. Modern corporations have learned to turn this cycle of anticipation into perpetual consumption. They don't just sell products, they sell moments of stimulation, engineered to keep the dopamine flowing and the customer returning. Every advertisement, every notification, every marketing campaign is a carefully calculated tug on that ancient reward system. The transformation began with the rise of consumer capitalism. In early societies, pleasure was linked to scarcity. Food, warmth, comfort, and intimacy were limited. But as industrialization and marketing advanced, scarcity became artificial. The new goal was not to meet needs, but to create endless wants. Psychologists and economists discovered that pleasure could be manufactured, that desire could be shaped by suggestion, emotion, and repetition. Edward Bernays, the father of modern public relations and nephew of Sigmund Freud, understood this better than anyone. He applied the psychology of the subconscious to commerce, teaching companies how to associate products with pleasure, identity, and aspiration. Cigarettes became symbols of freedom. Cars became expressions of power. Perfume became bottled desire. Pleasure was no longer the natural reward of experience. It was something that could be bought, branded, and advertised. As markets expanded, industries began competing not for survival, but for attention, the new currency of pleasure. Every second of focus a consumer spends scrolling, watching, or clicking is a moment their brain can be monetized. The digital revolution amplified this beyond anything seen before. Tech companies, armed with data and algorithms, discovered how to map the rhythms of human desire in real time. Each like, each swipe, each sound notification is a small dose of dopamine, a digital version of the brain's pleasure loop. The platforms are designed not to satisfy, but to stimulate, not to deliver happiness, but to keep us chasing it. This is the same principle that powers slot machines and casinos. Variable rewards. When outcomes are unpredictable, when the next post, video, or message could be extraordinary or dull, the brain's reward system becomes hyperactive. The uncertainty itself becomes addictive. Silicon Valley didn't invent addiction. It industrialized it. The economics of pleasure also thrives on what economists call planned dissatisfaction, the deliberate design of products and experiences that never feel quite complete. Fashion trends change by season, devices become obsolete within a year, and entertainment cycles reset weekly. This constant renewal ensures that pleasure remains just out of reach. Every satisfaction is followed by a reminder that there's something newer, better, faster waiting. The treadmill of consumption is powered by the illusion of progress. You're never buying what you need. You're buying a feeling that fades by design. Even luxury operates by this logic. The rarity of an item, the exclusivity of an experience, or the social status it confers all trigger ancient social instincts tied to pleasure and prestige. Companies have weaponized these instincts to turn desire into dependence. The pharmaceutical, food, and entertainment industries follow the same blueprint. The food industry exploits our evolutionary craving for sugar, fat, and salt. Nutrients once rare, now engineered into hyper-palatable combinations that override natural satiety signals. Fast food chains don't just sell taste, they sell the neurochemical rush of immediate gratification. Streaming platforms do the same with storytelling, offering continuous content with no end, ensuring that our brains never reach closure. Pleasure, once a signal of fulfillment, is now manipulated to prevent it. The more we consume, the less we are satisfied, and the more the economy grows. This is not a flaw in the system, it is the system. The economy depends on our restlessness. Contentment is bad for business. What makes this dynamic so powerful is that it operates invisibly. Most people believe they are making free choices, but the architecture of their desires is engineered. Every aspect of modern consumer life, color schemes, sound cues, scent marketing, personalized recommendations, is crafted to trigger micro-releases of dopamine. Our pleasure systems are continuously primed, guiding our attention toward what profits someone else. The line between need and want has blurred beyond recognition. We no longer buy to survive. We buy to feel alive. Yet the feeling fades, and we buy again. The system feeds on our pursuit of pleasure while ensuring we never quite catch it. But awareness of this cycle is growing. Economists, neuroscientists, and philosophers have begun to question whether an economy built on endless stimulation is sustainable, psychologically, socially, or ecologically. When pleasure becomes the driving force of consumption, it transforms from a tool of well-being into a tool of control. The pursuit of pleasure fuels debt, distraction, and ecological destruction, yet it also drives innovation and growth. It's a double-edged sword. The same instinct that built civilization now threatens to consume it. To break this loop, individuals and societies must redefine what kind of pleasure is worth pursuing. True satisfaction does not come from intensity, but from coherence, from aligning our desires with our values. In an economy that profits from our impulses, the most radical act is to pause, to choose deliberately, to seek pleasure that nourishes rather than depletes. The economics of pleasure reveals not just how companies monetize desire, but how desire itself has become the most valuable resource of the 21st century. Our attention, our emotions, our cravings, all are commodities traded in invisible markets. The question is no longer whether pleasure can be sold. It's whether we can afford to keep buying it. The more we allow companies to define what feels good, the less we understand what truly is good. The ultimate irony is that the system's success depends on our dissatisfaction. To reclaim our autonomy, we must learn to separate pleasure from manipulation, to rediscover it as something intrinsic, something earned, something real. When pleasure returns to its original purpose, as a signal of balance, connection, and life, it can once again serve humanity rather than humanity serving it. Digital pleasure, the algorithm of addiction. In the 21st century, pleasure has gone digital. What once came from touch, taste, movement, or connection is now delivered through screens, streams, and swipes. We've built an ecosystem where pleasure is instant, infinite, and algorithmically optimized. Every scroll, every click, every tap feeds into an invisible system designed to know you better than you know yourself. The digital age has not only transformed how we experience pleasure, it has reprogrammed the very mechanics of desire. In this new world, the brain's reward system, once honed for survival, is constantly hijacked by algorithms that know exactly how to keep it craving. The result is a subtle, pervasive form of addiction, one that doesn't destroy with violence, but with infinite comfort. The human brain evolved in scarcity. Our ancestors' pleasure responses were built to reward behaviors that increase chances of survival, finding food, securing mates, forming social bonds. These bursts of dopamine were small victories, pushing us to keep moving through uncertainty. But in the digital environment, uncertainty is engineered. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube use variable rewards, the same psychological mechanism behind slot machines, to keep us hooked. You scroll, not knowing when the next funny video, message, or like will appear. This unpredictability creates an endless loop of anticipation. The brain becomes addicted not to pleasure itself, but to the possibility of it. The algorithm doesn't have to give you what you want. It just needs to keep you wanting. Behind the glow of the screen lies a vast architecture of data, attention, and neurochemistry. Every interaction you make online, what you watch, pause on, react to, feeds into a feedback loop that refines your experience to be more pleasurable. But the pleasure here is not deep or lasting. It's frictionless stimulation. The algorithm doesn't care about meaning, truth, or growth. It cares about engagement. The longer you stay, the more data it collects, the more ads it serves. You are both the user and the product. Your emotions, curiosity, outrage, desire, are inputs to a machine that converts attention into profit. It's a perfect system of behavioral control, wrapped in the illusion of choice. The social dimension of digital pleasure makes it even more potent. Humans are wired for recognition and belonging. A like or a comment is the digital equivalent of a nod, a smile, a sign of approval. Each notification triggers a microdose of dopamine, reinforcing our need to check again and again. Over time, the brain's natural reward threshold increases, requiring more stimulation to feel the same effect. The result is what some neuroscientists call dopamine burnout, a state where everyday experiences lose their ability to bring joy. Real life begins to feel slow, dull, and underwhelming compared to the hyper-saturated digital world. Pleasure, once tied to presence, becomes a ghost, something you chase through pixels but can never hold. What makes digital pleasure so addictive is its personalization. The algorithm learns your rhythms, your insecurities, your late-night patterns of loneliness and boredom. It knows when you're most likely to scroll, when you're vulnerable, when you're looking for validation. It tailors your feed not to reflect who you are, but to shape who you become. The longer you interact, the more predictive the system becomes, creating a mirror that reflects not your reality, but your impulses. The algorithm doesn't just know your preferences, it cultivates them. Over time, this leads to a subtle erosion of autonomy. You think you're choosing what to watch, but your choices are being gently nudged, your curiosity guided along invisible paths designed for maximum engagement. Digital pleasure has also altered our sense of time. The endless scroll abolishes beginnings and endings. It's a constant now, a stream without pause or closure. This design keeps the reward system in a perpetual state of anticipation, denying the satisfaction that signals completion. The line between consumption and addiction fades. Studies show that heavy digital users experience similar neural patterns to those seen in substance addiction: cravings, tolerance, withdrawal, and relapse. But unlike drugs, digital pleasure doesn't carry an obvious cost. There's no hangover, no physical toll, no visible decline. Its effects are psychological: fragmented attention, reduced motivation, emotional flatness. Pleasure becomes cheap and omnipresent, yet somehow harder to feel. What's most dangerous about the algorithmic design of pleasure is that it operates under the guise of connection. We feel like we're interacting with others, but in reality, we're interacting with the system's representation of them, optimized for reaction, not relationship. Outrage, beauty, and novelty outperform nuance, empathy, and truth. The algorithm learns that extremes drive engagement, and so it feeds us extremes. Pleasure becomes polarized. Everything must shock, seduce, or provoke. We are no longer consuming for joy, but for stimulation. The brain, overwhelmed by constant microdoses of dopamine, loses sensitivity to subtlety. The result is a collective addiction to intensity, where the baseline of pleasure keeps rising while satisfaction keeps falling. And yet, the system's genius lies in its deniability. No one forces us to scroll, to click, to binge watch. We choose it, or so we believe. But the psychology behind these designs is not accidental. It's informed by decades of behavioral research, neuroscience, and user testing. Engineers at major tech firms study patterns of reward anticipation, designing interfaces that maximize time spent. Infinite scroll, autoplay, read receipts, streaks. These are not conveniences, they are hooks. Each one keeps the loop of desire alive. When you close the app, you don't feel full. You feel the faint pull to return, to check again, to not miss out. That lingering tension is the algorithm's masterpiece. Still, awareness is the first step toward resistance. Once you understand that the system's goal is not your pleasure, but your participation, you can begin to reclaim control. Digital pleasure isn't inherently evil. It's the misuse of it that becomes dangerous. Technology has the potential to connect, educate, and inspire genuine fulfillment. But it requires boundaries, consciousness, and intention. The problem isn't that we seek pleasure online, it's that we've allowed algorithms to define what pleasure means. To escape the algorithm of addiction, we must rediscover pleasure in its organic form. Pleasure that's slow, grounded, and real. Pleasure from art, conversation, movement, solitude, the kind that isn't optimized by code but felt in the body. The irony is that true pleasure often comes from the moments when we step away from the screen, when the dopamine loop finally quiets and we feel the fullness of attention again. The digital age has given us infinite stimulation, but stolen our capacity for depth. The challenge now is to rebuild it, to teach ourselves that pleasure isn't about the next hit, but about the quality of our experience. Because when algorithms design our desires, pleasure ceases to be human, it becomes mechanical. And the only way to reclaim it is to unplug, to pause, and to remember what it means to feel rather than just to click. Pleasure is universal, yet the ways in which it is understood, expressed, and valued vary dramatically across cultures, revealing deep truths about human nature and society. While biology provides the foundation for pleasure, our brains respond to food, intimacy, music, and social connection. Culture shapes how we pursue it, what we consider acceptable, and even how we define it. In some societies, pleasure is celebrated openly, integrated into rituals, festivals, and everyday life. In others, it is restrained, regulated by moral codes, religious doctrine, or social expectation. These variations are not trivial. They shape identity, social cohesion, and even individual well-being. For example, Mediterranean cultures are often associated with a philosophy of enjoying life's simple delights, long meals shared with family, laughter, music, and celebration. Pleasure here is communal, relational, and intertwined with social bonding, reflecting a belief that joy is not selfish but a shared experience. In contrast, certain ascetic traditions, such as those found in parts of South Asia or in monastic Christianity, approach pleasure with caution. Sensory indulgence is often seen as a distraction from spiritual growth or moral duty. Here, restraint itself becomes a source of satisfaction, and pleasure is redefined not as indulgence, but as moderation and mindful awareness. Even within the same culture, perceptions of pleasure can shift across social classes, gender roles, and historical periods. In Victorian England, for instance, open displays of desire were stigmatized, especially among women. Yet, private indulgences, literary exploration of passion, and coded social behaviors allowed for a complex negotiation between societal expectation and individual longing. These cultural lenses influence what triggers pleasure, how it is expressed, and whether it is pursued at all. Modern globalization, however, has blurred some of these distinctions. Media, advertising, and technology export cultural ideals of pleasure worldwide, often privileging consumption, novelty, and instant gratification over context, meaning, or tradition. Fast food, fashion trends, and digital entertainment create a global baseline for pleasure that sometimes clashes with local norms, producing tension between ancestral values and contemporary desires. At the same time, cultural differences in pleasure highlight the adaptability of the human brain. The reward system responds to context as much as it does to stimulus. A smile, a dance, or a ritual can activate the same neural circuits that might respond to chocolate or sexual intimacy. Culture teaches us what to value, how to interpret pleasure, and when to pursue or suppress it. This interplay between biology and culture illustrates that pleasure is both innate and learned, instinctual yet socially mediated. Cross-cultural studies in psychology and anthropology demonstrate that societies emphasizing communal pleasure, relational joy, and mindfulness tend to report higher life satisfaction than those prioritizing individual gain or material accumulation. These findings suggest that the way pleasure is framed and embedded in social life has profound implications for well-being. Even the rituals surrounding pleasure, food, music, art, storytelling, serve to reinforce social cohesion and shared identity. In some indigenous societies, for instance, songs, dances, and communal feasts are not merely sources of individual enjoyment. They are tools for teaching values, reinforcing roles, and sustaining collective memory. Pleasure, in this sense, is inseparable from meaning. Modern cultures, by contrast, often separate pleasure from purpose. The pursuit of individual gratification can become a cycle of fleeting highs without connection or context, feeding the hedonic treadmill described by neuroscientists. Yet the persistence of cultural diversity reminds us that pleasure is not one-dimensional. It can be simple or complex, restrained or indulgent, ephemeral or enduring, and it can be expressed collectively or privately. Understanding cultural perspectives on pleasure offers insight not just into human diversity, but into the very nature of desire, motivation, and fulfillment. It shows that while the brain is wired to seek reward, the rules of the game are written by society. Cultural norms, expectations, and values provide structure to our instinctual impulses, shaping when we indulge, how we celebrate, and how we balance immediate gratification with long-term well-being. The study of pleasure across cultures also reveals that human beings are remarkably adaptable. Even within a single society, norms change over time in response to technology, economy, and ideology. Practices once forbidden can become celebrated, and what was once central can fade into obscurity. This dynamism underscores that pleasure is not merely biological. It is a dialogue between instinct and environment, between what the body desires and what society deems acceptable. By examining these differences, we can better understand our own relationship to pleasure, how much of what we chase is innate, how much is learned, and how our habits reflect both personal and collective histories. Ultimately, cultural perspectives on pleasure demonstrate that while the pursuit of enjoyment is universal, its expression is profoundly shaped by context, meaning, and shared values, reminding us that pleasure is not only an individual experience, but also a social and moral phenomenon that reflects the priorities and wisdom of the societies in which we live. Pleasure, by its very nature, is designed to signal reward, to guide behavior towards survival, connection, and growth. Yet the same mechanisms that produce joy can also produce suffering when misaligned or overstimulated. What begins as delight can easily twist into dependency, craving, or even self-destruction. In this way, the pursuit of pleasure has a dark side, a shadow that emerges when the natural balance between desire and fulfillment is disrupted. The brain's reward system, with dopamine at its core, evolved to reinforce beneficial behaviors, but it is indifferent to context. It responds to stimulation, whether that stimulation serves survival or undermines it. When humans find ways to artificially trigger these pathways, through drugs, hyperpalatable food, gambling, pornography, or digital media, the same chemical signals that once ensured thriving instead hijack motivation and judgment. The result is a paradoxical cycle. Behaviors that initially bring intense pleasure can lead to stress, anxiety, shame, or physical harm over time. Addiction is the clearest manifestation of this process. The neural circuits that evolve to guide us toward life-sustaining activities become overtaxed, desensitized, and dysregulated. Each exposure demands more intensity to achieve the same effect, a process neuroscientists describe as tolerance. Meanwhile, the anticipation, craving, and withdrawal symptoms generate discomfort and psychological pain, turning the very thing we sought into a source of suffering. Yet addiction is only one example. Even socially acceptable pleasures, food, sex, entertainment, or luxury, can become corrosive when pursued without balance or purpose. Overindulgence can produce guilt, fatigue, and emotional flatness, while the hedonic treadmill ensures that the satisfaction derived from these activities fades quickly, leaving desire unfulfilled and the mind restless. The dark side of pleasure is not limited to overconsumption. It also emerges when pleasure is pursued in isolation from meaning. Moments of indulgence may produce immediate reward, but if they are disconnected from relationships, purpose, or growth, they can create emptiness rather than fulfillment. This emptiness can be psychologically painful, producing a sense of hollowness that drives further pursuit, often intensifying the cycle. Culturally and historically, societies have recognized this tension. Philosophers from Aristotle to Epicurus emphasized moderation, warning that unbridled pursuit of pleasure leads not to happiness, but to imbalance and suffering. Modern psychology confirms these insights. Pleasure without purpose often undermines well-being, while pleasure integrated with meaning and connection enhances it. The shadow of pleasure also extends to social and relational domains. Hedonistic behaviors that prioritize personal gratification over empathy or responsibility can cause harm to others, eroding trust, relationships, and community cohesion. The thrill of power, wealth, or status can motivate achievement, but when unchecked, it can corrupt morals, isolate the individual, and generate guilt or conflict. The neural reward system does not discriminate between ethical and unethical sources of pleasure. It simply reinforces what is repeated, for better or worse. Furthermore, the pursuit of pleasure can trigger anxiety and stress when desire outpaces availability. Unmet expectations, social comparison, and the illusion of abundance can amplify dissatisfaction. The same pleasures that were designed to motivate survival can generate psychological tension when misaligned with reality or self-awareness. Pain and pleasure are not opposites in this context. They are entwined. Pleasure's intensity often creates vulnerability to suffering, and the mind's craving for pleasure magnifies distress when the desired outcome is absent or fleeting. Modern technologies exacerbate this tension. Digital media, social networks, and instant gratification platforms provide endless sources of stimulation, yet they also create dependency, restlessness, and emotional fatigue. The artificial amplification of reward circuits can turn harmless pleasures into compulsions, while the comparison culture of curated online lives heightens dissatisfaction. Even natural pleasures, when pursued obsessively, can backfire. Sexual gratification can become compulsive, food can become addictive, leisure can become escapist, and wealth can become hollow. In every case, the pursuit of pleasure carries the potential for pain when divorced from moderation, reflection, and context. However, understanding the dark side of pleasure is not meant to demonize it. It is meant to illuminate the need for awareness and balance. Pleasure itself is neutral, a tool, a signal. Its potential for harm arises only when it is pursued indiscriminately or artificially amplified, beyond the capacity of the mind and body to regulate. By recognizing the mechanisms of desire, craving, and adaptation, humans can reclaim pleasure as a source of nourishment rather than suffering. Practices such as mindfulness, moderation, intentionality, and reflection help align pleasure with purpose, transforming it from a potential threat into a healthy guide. Ultimately, the shadow of pleasure reminds us that what feels good is not always what is good for us, and that the mind must learn to navigate desire with wisdom. True fulfillment lies not in the constant pursuit of immediate gratification, but in integrating pleasure with meaning, connection, and balance, ensuring that joy enhances life rather than undermining it. The darker side of pleasure, therefore, is not an inherent flaw but a call to consciousness, a signal that without awareness, the instinct designed to sustain life can instead generate suffering. Desire is one of the most fundamental drivers of human behavior, shaping choices, relationships, and even the structure of society itself. Yet it is inherently ambivalent, a force that can both empower and enslave. Psychologically, desire originates in the same neural circuits that mediate pleasure, reward, and motivation, with dopamine acting as a central signal for anticipation and pursuit. Unlike simple reflexes or needs, desire involves both cognition and emotion. It is not merely the want of a stimulus, but the imagining, planning, and longing for it. This combination of anticipation and projection makes desire uniquely potent, giving humans the ability to plan for the future, create art, innovate, and strive for goals that extend beyond immediate survival. Yet the same complexity also makes desire difficult to regulate. While evolution shaped it to guide behavior towards survival, reproduction, and social connection, modern environments often offer endless sources of stimulation that activate these circuits without meaningful purpose. The result is a tension between the instinct to pursue and the need to regulate, a psychological struggle between impulsivity and control. Control in this context is not merely repression, but conscious modulation of desire, the ability to delay gratification, to weigh long-term outcomes against immediate rewards, and to align wants with personal values. The classic studies of self-control, such as Walter Mischel's marshmallow experiments, illustrate how the capacity to delay immediate pleasure in favor of greater future benefit predicts a range of life outcomes, from academic success to emotional well-being. Neuroscience confirms that control engages prefrontal regions of the brain, which can override the limbic system's impulsive drives when exercised intentionally. Yet, desire has a stubborn way of bypassing reason. The more we focus on suppressing or denying it, the stronger it often becomes, a phenomenon known as the paradox of control. This explains why attempts to entirely avoid pleasurable behaviors, whether food, sex, or digital media, can backfire, triggering obsession, compulsive engagement, or guilt. Psychologists describe this as the tension between wanting and liking. Wanting, driven by dopamine, can persist even when the actual pleasure of consumption, mediated by opioids and endorphins, diminishes. Understanding this distinction is crucial for mastering desire. Control is most effective not through rigid suppression, but through conscious direction, choosing where and how to invest energy toward meaningful goals, rather than chasing every transient stimulus. Cultural and social factors play a critical role in shaping desire and its regulation. Societies provide norms, rituals, and frameworks that define which desires are acceptable, which are aspirational, and which should be restrained. Religion, morality, and social expectations all function as external structures that help individuals navigate the potential chaos of unbridled longing. At the same time, modern consumer culture often exploits desire, providing endless novelties and stimulation designed to short-circuit control, creating cycles of craving, consumption, and dissatisfaction. This tension is heightened in the digital age, where algorithms continuously offer stimuli that exploit neural mechanisms of desire, producing engagement without true fulfillment. The psychology of desire reveals a paradox. It is both necessary for growth and a potential source of suffering. Without desire, humans would lack motivation, innovation, and connection. Yet without control, desire can spiral into addiction, distraction, and discontent. Effective management of desire requires awareness, reflection, and deliberate practice. Mindfulness, goal setting, and self-regulation techniques help recalibrate the balance between pursuit and satisfaction. Importantly, aligning desire with values transforms it from a mere drive into a tool for meaning. For example, the desire to achieve, create, or help others can activate the same reward circuits as fleeting indulgences, but produce far more enduring satisfaction. The interplay between desire and control also shapes personal identity and agency. Individuals who cultivate self-mastery over their impulses often report greater life satisfaction, resilience, and a sense of autonomy, while those dominated by unchecked desire frequently experience stress, regret, and emotional volatility. Desire is not inherently good or bad. It is a signal, a compass pointing toward what we find valuable, pleasurable, or necessary. Control is the mechanism that ensures this compass is navigated wisely, preventing short-term impulses from undermining long-term flourishing. In the most functional form, desire and control work together. Desire motivates action, control channels it purposefully, and the result is a life that is both dynamic and sustainable. The psychology of desire and control, therefore, illuminates one of the central challenges of human existence, balancing our instinctual drives with reflective awareness, harnessing the energy of longing without letting it dominate, and transforming ephemeral cravings into sources of growth, connection, and fulfillment. Understanding this balance allows us to reclaim autonomy over our impulses, to experience pleasure without compulsion, and to align our actions with our deeper values, demonstrating that mastery of desire is not repression, but the art of living fully. Human life is propelled by the pursuit of pleasure, yet the deepest forms of fulfillment often lie beyond pleasure, in meaning, flow, and transcendence. While pleasure signals reward and guides survival, it is transient, fleeting, and often insufficient for enduring satisfaction. Meaning, by contrast, offers a stable anchor, a sense that our actions, relationships, and experiences are part of something larger than ourselves. Psychological research, from Viktor Frankl's studies on existential purpose to contemporary positive psychology, shows that individuals who cultivate a sense of meaning experience greater resilience, lower anxiety, and more enduring well-being than those who chase pleasure alone. Meaning is not simply feeling good. It is the recognition that life matters, that effort contributes to a broader narrative, and that even suffering can be integrated into growth. Closely related to meaning is the concept of flow, a state described by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi as complete immersion in an activity where self-consciousness fades, time distorts, and performance feels effortless. Flow is not mere pleasure, it is engagement at the highest level of human capability. In flow, the brain's reward systems are engaged differently. Dopamine, endorphins, and norepinephrine combine to create a sense of energized focus, intrinsic reward, and mastery.